multi-passionate people, if you want to monetize your multiple passions and do so in a way that feels purposeful and meaningful, you have to understand your creative archetypes and how this interconnects with your identity. As a multi-passionate person, you have lots of passions, and that means you do not have one fixed identity. Whereas somebody like a neurotypical are often one-trick ponies, so they have a fixed identity because they only do one thing. However, for us, we can do multiple different things, and as a result of that, we have multiple different identities, which is why there's so much conflict and why there's so much contradiction, and equally why it gets so confusing. So I'm going to explain what these creative archetypes are and how these interconnect with you being able to monetize them and be able to make money out of your multiple passions without niching down. That's what I should have said earlier on. So how do I know this? Well, I spent 28 years as an artist manager in the music industry. All the artists I managed, some of whom were massively successful, sold millions of albums, some of the biggest DJs in the world, etc., were multi-passionate people. And it was about not niching down, but niching up their different passions to solve specific problems. And then since then, I've spent 5 years in the creative economy. I've built my own audience, but equally, I've helped hundreds of multi-passionate people create unique brands, stand out, make money, etc., etc., right? So let's look. There's 5 different archetypes, creative archetypes. There's the perfectionist archetype, there's the rebel archetype, there is the wounded healer, there's the social disruptor, and there's the authentic creator. But the two most important archetypes are the perfectionist archetype and the rebel archetype. So the perfectionist archetype is your shadow. This is all the fear. This is the fear of failure, the fear of being seen, the fear of being perceived, the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of everything. Okay, and this is what keeps you stuck. So if you're stuck in your perfectionist archetype, you're not taking action. You've got all these different ideas, but you're not taking action. Why? Because you're avoiding making decisions. Why are you avoiding making decisions? Well, because you're scared of picking the wrong idea and wasting your time. So then you start procrastinating, and then you beat yourself up because your productivity, or should I say your self-esteem, is directly linked to your productivity. If you're not being productive, you're beating yourself up. Why you beat yourself up? Well, because you're procrastinating and wasting your time. And that means you're not taking action and da-da-da. So you can see here, you're just stuck in an overthinking loop where your brain is trying to find certainty. And there's no such thing as certainty, right? You're a creative person. You are literally creating your own reality, which does not exist yet. None of us can predict the future. We cannot, even though we think we've got, this is what my business is going to look like. It's very rare that a business ends up looking exactly what it looks like in the beginning. It evolves, it pivots, and so on. But you can't foresee this by standing still. You can only see it by moving forward, okay? So what is the rebel archetype? The rebel archetype is the opposite. It's understanding that there's no such thing as certainty. And it's so any time that you're faced with an idea, that you follow your curiosity. You say, well, I'm really curious about this idea. And then you will go and you will experiment with it. You'll say, hey, I'm going to do, for example, YouTube for 30 days. I'm going to do X amount of videos in 30 days on YouTube and see how I feel about it. That is an experiment, and that means you're taking action. And that's going to give you momentum. Momentum is also going to give you information. Is this the right path? Am I enjoying it? Is this good for my energy? All these kind of questions. And you know what happens when you start taking action and start following through on your curiosity and your experiments? You build self-trust and self-confidence, because ultimately you're saying to yourself, hey, I'm interested in doing this thing, and then you're experiment with these things. And the other thing about being experiments as well is it's experiments that fail or succeed, not you. It's just an experiment. You're trying with YouTube videos or a blog or whatever, or podcast, whatever it might be. So what happens here is that you get results. You either find out that yes, YouTube is for me, or no, actually I prefer podcasting. But either way, you're getting information, you're getting results. And then you take more action. So let's say instead of YouTube, you focus on podcasts, and you find podcasts. They're just really light for you. They're very easy to do. You get lots of connections, and you end up building this amazing business about that, right? And that's all because you're taking more action. And when you take more action, you've got self-confidence, you take more curiosity. So these are the two most important archetypes of them. The perfectionist never takes any action, stays stuck in fear, looking for certainty, the fear of the unknown, the fear of all these different things, looking for the perfect idea, the perfect path, none of which exists. All because they try to avoid the fear of failure, which is impossible, right? Or there's the rebel archetype, which is basically following your curiosity. It's experimenting with different ideas, knowing that most experiments will fail, but it's the experiment that fails, and that you get the self-confidence from trying the experiment, not from the success or failure of it, but for just trying and following your curiosity, okay? So It's people like Rebel Archetypes, you look at people like David Bowie. How many times did he reinvent himself? How many different characters did he create? How many different musical personas did he create? It took him about 9 years to be initially successful because he was in the perfectionist archetype. He was copying other people. He was seeing why other people were successful, and he was trying to emulate that. However, after a period of time, he said, F it, I'm going all in. And he embraced his rebel archetype and he started experimenting. Okay? So, and we know this because of all of his different characters. Then there's the wounded healer archetype. We're highly sensitive people. As a result of that, we get hurt easy. We experience shame. We experience trauma. We experience life. Life is harder. The world is harder on highly sensitive people. But as a result of that, that means that we experience more pain. Now, there's two ways of looking at pain. You can say, oh, that's a real big problem. Well, it is a big problem. However, what is the reframe? What is the positivity that you can take out of experienced pain? Pain is a messaging. So if you can articulate pain and then through the medium of poetry or videos or podcasting or some sort of creative outlet or online courses or coaching, whatever that might be, if you can take that pain and articulate it to help others, the younger version of yourself who doesn't quite fully understand that level of articulation of pain that you can, they will come to you, and that is what a business is. You're literally helping the younger version of yourself. You can't get any more purposeful or meaningful than experiencing a pain, overcoming the pain, and then helping the younger version of yourself overcome the same pain, right? And that is what the wounded healer is. So here we're talking about Maya Angelou. So she wrote her memoir, which was all about her trauma and what happened to her. And this gave the voice to voices. This gave a voice to women specifically who had experienced a similar kind of trauma to, rather than hide their shame and keep it in and blame themselves, it would be to share it and to help others feel seen and heard. Then we've got the social disruptor. We have a lot of, when there's social problems happening in the world, we have a lot of social injustice sensitivity, right? We really feel this. Again, this is because of our hypersensitivity. This is what we do. We have deep levels of empathy. So when there's atrocities happening wherever in the world and whatever they might be, whether it might be the climate or it might be to populations or whatever we're talking about, then we feel very much I don't know what the right word would be. Incensed, I suppose, right? We get really involved in it and we want to help change that. And that might be capitalism. There might be numerous different things where we are seeing people being marginalized for either politically or environmentally or whatever it might be, right? And we want to stand up for those people. So you can see here, Nelson Mandela was a social disruptor. Then you've got the authentic creator. We don't want to, there's two kinds of creators. Let me explain it this way, right? So you have the neurotypicals. Neurotypicals are like cooks, right? They will find a recipe, a linear sort of like A to B to C to D, and then they will just keep following it, right? It doesn't bother them that they're copying somebody else, that it's not their idea, that there's no originality, and because they're cooks, right? Now, often cooks are more successful than chefs because we are chefs, and I'll explain what that means in a second. But for cooks, it's just a step by step. And if you can do that, it's a lot easier to copy somebody else's already successful plan. We have a problem with that because we pride ourselves on originality, on authenticity. We want to add our own take on it, and that's why we're chefs. And the reason we're chefs is that we want to create these amazing taste sensations that have never been experienced before. We want to create something completely original. And in order for us to do that, we take a bunch of ingredients that already exist. This is a bunch of ideas or a bunch of concepts or a bit of both, and we add them together to create something new. And that is because of our idea synthesis skills and because we're creative, deeply creative people, but we want to do something original. So we're taking ingredients that already exist, but we're putting them together in a completely unique way in order to create a unique dish that's never been tasted before, right? And that's because of because we're authentic. So if you look at somebody like Brené Brown, for example, I'm sure you know who she is, but she is a shame researcher. That was what she did, PhD shame researcher. However, it was her going on to her TED Talks and expressing her lived experience with complete authenticity, talking about shame, the shame of going viral and other people in her comments and all the things that she talked about is what helped her sell millions and millions of books. And that is because she's got a unique take on shame that nobody had ever seen before, okay? Lots of people have talked about shame, but she took shame and she took a bunch of ingredients, but she created it and presented it in a way that we had never even thought about before. Because shame is I am bad, guilt is I have done something bad. She totally understood this, that I am bad, that shame is an identity thing, as opposed to guilt, which is, I've done something bad or I am bad, right? So these kind of insights gave her a unique aspect, an authentic aspect on shame, and that's why she's been so successful. Okay, so this is what it is. You have to understand your creative archetypes. Now, you are going to be one of these predominant, okay? But often we can be all of these things simultaneously. If you look at somebody like David Bowie, well, David Bowie was authentic. David Bowie was also a social disruptor. He was helping, people like in terms of gender fluidity, in terms of feeling like an alien, in terms of feeling left out. That's what he was doing there. He was also a perfectionist. That's where he spent the first 9.5 years of his music career. But he was also a wounded healer. Like all musicians, he created content based on his own experience, based on his heart getting broken, or this experience, or feel like an alien. And that's how he used his wounded healer to create his art, okay, to help other people feel seen and heard. So look, you can be all these things simultaneously, and this is not easy work, but nonetheless, the most important thing is if you're stuck in this perfectionist archetype is to get out of that, okay? And the way to do that, the perfectionist archetype is not taking action because you're avoiding making decisions, because you're scared of picking the wrong idea and wasting your time, which means you're procrastinating and you beat yourself up for wasting time. You're stuck in a loop, okay? The way to get out of this is to follow your curiosity. Which idea do you feel curious about? Experiment with it. Take action. Gain momentum. This will give you information. You will build self-trust in yourself and self-confidence, okay, which will give you more results, which means you'll take more action. So it's all about, if you're here, the first step is to get to here and then discover which parts of yourself you can add, because it's all about solving problems. Okay, so I hope this helps, and I'll see you in other videos. Peace out.